Hi, Rob here. Welcome to IELTS Transformation Writing. We're talking about grammar, which is obviously very important for your score. In this lesson, we're going to look at adjective clauses, so relative clauses. Relative clauses, as you can see, are actually adjectives. So adjectives describe nouns. So we could use a one-word adjective, or we can use more words together, which we will talk about here. So in this lesson, we'll look at what an adjective clause is, why you need to use them, when you need to use them. So when we use an adjective clause, we're forming a complex sentence. So remember, you must form a mix of simple and complex sentences to achieve a band 6 or more. It's not an option, you must. Here's an example. The bikes that they ride are very fast. So that is a subordinating conjunction. Remember, we need those to make a complex sentence. They is the subject, and ride is the finite verb. So remember, a clause has a subject and a finite verb. A dependent clause has a subordinating conjunction, subject plus verb. So here, that they ride is describing the bike. Because if we just said the bikes are very fast, then there's not much information. So we're using these to give more information, which of course you need to do throughout IELTS. Just a quick reminder, a complex sentence is a subordinate clause and an independent clause, or a dependent clause and an independent clause. Clause is a subject and a verb, as I said. An independent clause, for example, he told too many lies. Oh dear. Notice the comma. Be very aware of commas, as we've mentioned before, which was a shame. He told too many lies, which was a shame. So, there's our subordinating conjunction, and in this case, this conjunction is the subject. Another word for these subordinating conjunctions is a relative pronoun. So if you watch our lessons on subjects, you'll remember, or you will see, that pronouns can be subjects of sentences. So that's why they call them often relative pronouns, but it's also a conjunction. Just a quick reminder, for Band 8, we're looking at a wide range of structures. 7, a variety of complex structures. 6, a mix of simple and complex sentences. 5, only a limited range, so not much range of structures, so lots of repeated structures. So why do we want to use adjective clauses? Well, we're going to use them in all the writing tasks. In the task 1 letter, general training, task 1 academic, the report, and the essay, and of course in the speaking test. When you describe ideas in task 2 writing, you're developing your position better. So more description means a clearer position for you, a better description of your ideas. So this makes it easy for the reader to imagine what you're saying. Task 1 academic writing, we need to give more information about some data. Blah, 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 which was more than something, something. I'll give you some examples. Also, of course, relative clauses and adjective clauses are throughout the listening and the reading test, so you need to understand what they do to help you understand the listening and the reading. Also, we want to enable you, to help you to produce and link clauses and phrases to create a wide range of possible sentences, just as you can in your own language. So the goal of all this grammar is to help you to be able to express your ideas in the same way that you can in your own language. When do we use them? Well, as I said, to develop your position, to describe it more and talk about the result. For example, encouraging citizens of a city to ride bicycles would reduce pollution. And now we can talk about the result. So if you remember, point, example, result. So we can use them to talk about the result, which would mean that everyone is healthier. Mean that we've got inside there we have a noun clause, okay, which the noun clauses are explained in the next series of videos. Here's in the task 1, academic writing, hydropower, where it is down here at the bottom, look, hydropower, which was the only fuel source not to increase, remained fairly steady at 4 quadrillion units over the whole period. Okay. So you can see there how we're using a relative clause to give more information, to help you to summarize, forget that word there, summarize the information, not describe it. Even though, of course, adjective clauses are describing, they're helping you to describe the situation better, to summarize it better, okay? We make comparisons, there you go. Adjective clauses are used to describe nouns. So we can use them any time that we want to describe people, places or things. So of course we do this a lot in the speaking test. So you should be thinking about trying to describe things more, describe things better. That should be your goal in your head. And this guy here, as you can see, is describing the man that he remembers. There was a man who, blah, 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 who had black hair, big bushy eyebrows, and a big nose. There you go. There are 2 types. We've got relative clauses and nominal relative clauses. Now, a nominal means noun. So in many languages, nom means name. So, in all the Latin languages, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, they use this word or a very similar word to mean name. So a noun is the name that we give something. What is this? It's a coffee cup. That's a noun, isn't it? I'm describing this thing. We use nouns to describe, give things a name. So, and as we've said before, the adjective clause is a dependent clause and not a phrase. It must have a finite verb, okay? We'll also talk about how to reduce them, to make them smaller, which is the next step in thinking, which is really more like a band 7 plus, really. Let's have a quick look. What do you think these might be? The essay that she wrote was confusing. The news that Ian left the company surprised no one. The year that I arrived here was 2000. The reason that he quit the team was a mystery. The person that spoke to me was extremely rude. And the bedroom that faces the streets is too noisy. So really, you can see in here that she wrote that Ian left the company, that I arrived, that he quit the team, that spoke to me, that faces the streets. These are the adjective clauses. They're describing the noun at the beginning. So are they relative clauses or nominal relative clauses? Is the relative clause describing the subject, or is it the same as the subject and giving more information about it? So in this presentation, in this lesson, we will answer this question at the end. Because when you first look at them, they all look the same, but they're not. They are either basically a relative clause, an adjective, or a noun. Okay? So how do we make a relative clause? We need a relative clause marker, or subordinated conjunction. We need to add that to a subject and a finite verb and add them into a dependent clause. We've got 5 relative clause markers, or some people call them relative pronouns. So the first one is which, then we've got who, whom, whose, and that. Okay, so all these pronouns and conjunctions describe different things. Which describes things, who describes people, whom describes people, but it's in the object position only. So Don't worry if you're not sure what that means, I will explain. But this is an important point. Whose is both people and things and describes possession. And that is both people and things, okay? So we will look at these in more detail. Two types of relative clause. We've got a defining relative clause and we've got a non-defining relative clause. This is important because it affects which words you can use, and it affects commas. And as we know, as you will see, commas are important because you need to get the punctuation right. Otherwise you can be penalised. So a defining relative clause is when the relative clause is necessary. We need it to understand the sentence. A non-defining, on the other hand, is extra information. In a relative clause, a defining relative clause, we don't use commas, so no commas. On the other hand, we must use commas for non-defining relative clauses. So as we'll talk about more in the punctuation lesson, you'll see how important commas are. And they can be challenging as well. For example, the report, which I have in my hand, is very good. So if I have it in my hand, the report is very good, well, you can see it. So I don't need to tell you it's in my hand, but it's extra information. Maybe I'm saying that because I want to emphasize it. Maybe we've talked about other reports before. It depends on the situation. Defining relative clauses, that is okay. On the other hand, non-defining, we cannot use that. So if you ask a native speaker, can I use that or which here? Usually they'll give you the right answer, but they don't know why. Well, this is why. Non-defining relative clauses are used with proper nouns. Proper nouns means names. So the Gold Coast, which is in southeast Queensland, is a beautiful place. We must use commas and we must use which. There you go. The Gold Coast, which is Australia's 6th largest city, is in southeast Queensland. How do you know if it's a relative clause? Well, something is missing. Let me explain this to you more. A relative clause must also always have an antecedent. The antecedent is the noun, the thing that we are describing. And the antecedent must be in one of these positions. Okay. The antecedent must be either the subject of the relative clause. Let's have a look. The bag which was stolen belonged to Faye. So the bag is the subject. The bag belonged to Faye. Which bag? That's unnatural. There's not enough information. There's the antecedent, the bag. This is the noun that we are describing. And the bag and which are the same thing. The bag was stolen. Full stop. The bag belonged to Faye. So when we use these relative clauses, we're joining sentences. We're being more efficient with the language. If we said all the time the bag was stolen, the bag belonged to Faye, this would be very, very basic English. It's not wrong, but it's not efficient. There's our subject and verb, which was stolen. The woman that called me was quite rude. The woman subject. The woman was quite rude. Which woman? We need more information. There's the antecedent, the woman. That subject called verb. And we've got the object, me. Okay? So, the antecedent can be the subject. So the bag and which are the same. The antecedent can also be the object of the relative clause, that the wine comes from Spain. The wine, subject, comes, verb, from Spain. The antecedent is the wine. She, now we have a subject, look. She enjoys. What does she enjoy? The wine comes from Spain. She enjoys, what does she enjoy? She enjoys the wine. She enjoys the wine. The wine that she enjoys comes from Spain. So she enjoys what? It's the direct object. So enjoy is a transitive verb. So you need to understand, this is explained in our video about verbs, but a transitive verb. We have transitive verbs and intransitive. This is important to know, to learn how to do relative clauses, and it's also important when we study the passive, which is essential for IELTS. There we go. She enjoys the wine. Again, look. The song was beautiful. Subject, verb. The song is the antecedent. And then she sang what? Sing is, in this case, a transitive verb. Actually, it can be both. But we have an object. She sang the song, didn't she? She sang the song was beautiful. So we've connected it. The song that she sang was beautiful. Okay. So that was transitive verbs. Also, we have intransitive verbs. We adhere to something. We don't say we adhere the rules. We adhere to the rules. So an intransitive verb has either no object, for example, she adhered, or if we want to add an object, then she adhered to the rules. Okay. So same idea here. The rule is pretty strict. Which rule? The rule which we must adhere to. The rule is the antecedent. We are describing it. Subject, finite verb. Remember, the finite verb is the modal verb in this case, the auxiliary. To. We must adhere to the rule. Same idea here. The chap whom he confides in was odd. The chap was odd. Odd means strange. Chap means man. The chap is the antecedent. He confides in the chap. When we use whom, so remember whom is about the object of the relative clause. When the antecedent is the object, we can also replace it with who. Whom can always be replaced with who. Okay? So really, I don't recommend that you use whom. It's too risky unless you're super good, which I'm sure you are, but in this case, let's not take too many risks. So the chap whom he confides in was odd. Okay? So here, the antecedent is the indirect object of the relative clause, which means it also means it's the object of the preposition to and in. Okay, so this can be quite complicated. You might need to watch this a couple of times and look at some more examples and look at your own writing and look at some native speaker writing and put these relative clauses in brackets and have a look to see if the antecedent is the subject of the relative clause or the object. Okay, so back to this. Relative clause or nominal relative clause. So, is there something missing? Remember, a relative clause means there's something missing. So here, the essay that she wrote was confusing. Is there anything missing? That she wrote. Can we say she wrote? She wrote what? So in other words, the object is missing. Ian left the company. Is that complete? Is there anything missing? Ian left the company? No. Subject, verb, object. Complete. See, before subject, verb, and we needed an object, the essay. So that one is a nominal relative clause. The year that I arrived was 2000. The year was 2000 that I arrived. I arrived. This one's actually a bit different. We can also say the year when I arrived, but that is replaced. So when I arrived, I arrived, there's nothing missing. I arrived, subject, verb. Intransitive verb, we don't need an object. So I should have written when really there, and that would be clearer. So in here we can say, we can remove the antecedent. When I arrived was 2000. That Ian left the company surprised no one. So when you watch the noun clause video lesson, this should become clearer. Okay. Again, this is quite technical. That he quit the team is a mystery. Don't need anything. He quit the team. Complete. So that's a nominal relative clause. That spoke to me. Who spoke to you? The person spoke to me. The person was extremely rude. So there is something missing. The subject is missing, isn't there? The person spoke to me. So we can't say that spoke to me. Well, it has no meaning. There's no subject. So that's a relative clause. And finally, that faces the street. What faces the street? Something missing. So here there's a subject missing. The bedroom that faces the street is too noisy. Oops. The bedroom that faces the street is too noisy. So is there something missing? It's connected to, could be the object is missing or the subject. In other words, the antecedent. But in a nominal relative clause, the antecedent, the news, and that Ian left the company, these are the same thing. This is a noun and this is a noun. Okay? So obviously the word that doesn't help often because we use that in relative clauses, we use it in noun clauses. For example, I know that you will pass your test. So that's that you will pass your test is the object of know. So we can use it in relative clauses, noun clauses, and also it's a pronoun. That book is mine. So we have to be careful. Again, it's quite technical, but once you start to look and to notice and be a meerkat, as I mentioned, this will become easier. So that's part one. Now move on to part two, where we will talk about reducing these relative clauses. But this information is essential to move on to being able to reduce, which means you get a higher score. So thanks for watching, and I hope your learning is going well. Thank you.